this session, it's all about integration between Dynamics CRM and SharePoint, the sort of good and the bad, and we'll talk a little bit about how we approach building solutions. I'm going to mainly focus on some of the out-of-the-box integration, but then I'll show some of the other things which you can do as well. I'm going to use an Office 365 demo environment just because that's got the latest and greatest of everything in terms of the integration, but it is relevant to sort of on-prem, cloud, or hybrid scenarios, so we can go, I'll explain what works with what different versions and stuff like that as I go through. Brief agenda. So I'll do a bit of introduction around Dynamics CRM. A fair few of you are probably already familiar with it. We'll then talk about the documents integration, which is the main point of integration between the two products. And we'll look at some of the other integration options, BI, Yammer, other things as well. Talk a little bit about approaching a project, and hopefully we've got time, we'll wrap some stuff up and also talk about some of the new stuff which is coming in the next few weeks as well. Okay, so introducing Dynamics CRM. I've just sort of thrown out a screenshot there. I'll go into CRM in a minute when we actually get into some of the demos. This shows actually what Dynamics CRM is. There are different flavors of it. This is the latest version, so this is the CRM version 2015. What is it? It's essentially a relationship management system about relating different records together, so customers, contacts, opportunities, cases, and then managing a series of activities against those, so tasks, emails, appointments, notes as well. It's very customizable. It's typically focused around winning and servicing customers. You can use it for other things, but at its core, it's a customer winning and a customer servicing system. I've got a lot of customers who use it for other things when they need to manage relationships and interconnected things as well. It's got sales, marketing, and service modules. And one of the big things which it wins on generally against its competition is its Outlook integration. And Microsoft have done a lot recently in terms of the mobile interface and the mobile app development as well. How can you get it? Well, actually, you can get it in a few ways. On premises, there's versions going back a long way. So latest flavor is 2015, there's 2013, there's 2011, and then before that, you're into their numbers. They're always changing between years and numbers, aren't they? So then it was version 4, version 3, version 1.2. Don't go there. You can also get it on Office 365. There's different flavors on Office 365, so you can get the professional license, the enterprise license. They've also got a couple of other things available as well. So there's like the marketing option, which is like the marketing pilot product, which they purchased a few years ago, about a year ago. There's also some of the social listening functionality as well, so you can actually pull in stuff from Twitter, pull in stuff from Facebook, set up cases off the back of those as well. So it's quite a wide and varied product suite now, and it continues to grow. Microsoft recently acquired Parature as well, which they're going to integrate into some of the service functionality. So I put this slide up just for us to start to think about, actually, when I deal with a lot of my customers, you can actually use Dynamics CRM or SharePoint. And I want to sort of push this up there just to sort of give us some ideas around what the two different things offer. So in CRM, we can do things like manage contacts, manage tasks, track issues, cases. We've got workflow to control data moving through our system. It's mobile and cross-browser, and it's got Outlook integration as well. See, SharePoint does that as well. So actually, often, the same things can be achieved in the different products. Both of them let you do the same sort of thing. So there is times when you think, well, actually, I could do this in SharePoint. I could do this in CRM. Which one should I be using? So you have to think a little bit about that and think about which one is most relevant to you. But there are still some key differences as well. So just throwing up some of the differences here. I would say that CRM is typically more of a product. So out of the box, it's got a lot more it does straight away. So it's got its ability to manage customers, its ability to manage contacts, its ability with sales process, issues, tracking, servicing. That's all there straight away. You don't have to build it, which you would have to build in SharePoint. It's typically more customer focused. Doesn't have to be, but it typically is. It's much more focused around sales and marketing and service to customers. And its relationship management is the thing which it does really well in comparison to SharePoint. SharePoint, you can manage a list of things. You can manage a list of customers. But then when you start thinking about, I need to relate those customers to contacts, and I want to relate some activities to those contacts, and then I want to create some issues related to the customers. You can sort of do it with lookups, but it's a bit clunky and it's a bit awkward. CRM does that sort of stuff really well, and that's where CRM wins typically. SharePoint, the things it does much better, I'd like to think anyway, is it manages sort of document and media storage really well. CRM doesn't really do that at all. You can sort of attach it into records, but it's not that great. Document editing, you know, either in the native Office apps, in the web apps, or in some of the new apps for mobile as well. It does that sort of stuff really well now. Team working, collaboration, also working with external parties as well, so letting customers, partners come in and interface with us. SharePoint's really good at that, you know, team sites, project sites, that's what it's always done well. And also some of the business intelligence stuff as well, whether it's reporting services integration, Excel services, or Power BI. So why do you integrate? I think there's a few key reasons which I've just thrown up there on the board. You typically want to choose the right product for the right job. So like I said, if I want to manage documents, I'm typically looking at SharePoint to do that piece. If I'm wanting to manage customers and contacts, Dynamics CRM is probably a bit of a better product to be able to do that. And it's also about having the data in the relevant application for the users. So if I'm a sales guy, I really want to just sit in CRM and do my job, and I want all my data available to me. If I'm just, I don't know, a member of the product team or something like that, and I'm developing a product, I might want to look up a customer's telephone number, but I don't need access to this whole application where I need to interface with things. So I'm using the right application and making the data available in those applications. And the third one, most brutally, is to save on licensing. CRM is quite expensive to license. You know, you're probably looking at 3, 4, 5 times the license cost of what a SharePoint CAL is. Even with on Office 365, it's quite a lot more expensive, so it's a bit of a premium application. So you tend to think, right, we've got to have the people in there to do their job. Now, there are some specific things on licensing which I'll throw up there at the end, and there is some offers on at the moment if you want to move ahead with CRM, and I'll talk about those at the end. Okay, so the first piece of integration which I wanted to talk about was the documents integration and what that offers, because that's the main piece of integration between the two products. Just thrown up on screen now, and we're diving into a demo in a second, but what you actually see on screen there is a Dynamics CRM screen, but actually what it's showing is documents sitting from a specific location in SharePoint, but visualized within CRM. Those documents are specifically related to a specific customer or account, Litware, and the screen looks like it's in CRM. It doesn't look like it's in SharePoint. It looks like it's native to CRM. I've got options here to upload, create new, and even do things like check in, check out as I actually select documents as well. So it looks native to CRM. It looks like it's part of CRM, but we're leveraging the functionality and the ability of SharePoint to manage documents, do version control as well. So exactly what it is. It displays SharePoint documents in CRM. It looks native. It looks like it's native to CRM. There's SharePoint functions like web apps, check in, check out are all available. And I'm going to go through with you how you can either manage these locations against customers, either manually or automatically against the record as well. And a record can have multiple document locations. So a single customer could have documents for a project and for contracts and something else, and they could all be in different parts of SharePoint. So you can link in multiple different libraries into a single location, and we'll be going through that. Okay, so first demo, we're going to go through actually using document locations, how they're created, and what functionality is available. Okay, let's just make sure the screen looks okay. It's a bit crunched. The screen resolution's a little bit low here, but hopefully we'll be able to go through and see everything. So this is CRM. This is the latest version of CRM. The UI is this is how the UI's looked for the last couple of versions, so for 2013 and 2015. If you've got an older version, it will look a little bit different. Microsoft have this thing about changing the UI constantly with this product for some reason. I don't know. Some of the latest previews of the next release, or the latest updates, which are available on Microsoft's website, actually they've changed the UI again for some reason. I mean, one of the things is they're trying to make it a little bit more touch-friendly. So you've got like this sort of ribbon which opens up across the top, and I can switch between sales, service, marketing, and I can scroll along here and look at the different record types which are available to me. so I can manage different things in the sales area. So I'm going to dive into accounts. So this is where my customers are. One thing to mention as we go through this, which I talk to my customers about as I'm demonstrating stuff, is that everything's customizable. So every name, every field type can be changed. If you want to store additional information, you can do so in CRM as well. Now, let's just dive into one of these records. Hopefully I'll remember which one it is. Let's have a look at Contoso, good old Contoso. So what we see here is a CRM record. And we're seeing in a number of bits of data on screen, some key contact information, addresses, other information which is available as we scroll down, like contacts, recent opportunities, cases. Now, again, depending on how your screen's set up and stuff like that, that might go wider across screen or scroll down. Microsoft are really now trying to make it a single screen experience with CRM. Previously, it used to be quite tab-based. Now the idea is within a record, you can see everything. And as you actually click through the record, you can see more information, and you can load up other associated records. So for instance, I can go into this contact record here, Robert Lyon, and it will load up that record. But one of the things it's not doing is opening up lots of different tabs. So I'm navigating around the system cleanly within a single tab, which is a big change with some of the from previous versions of CRM. Now, I'm in this Contoso record. I can move up to the top here, and I can see other things which are associated with this record, including documents. And if I click over to documents, hopefully, if I pick the right one, we'll give it a second to load up. And what this is actually going to load up is a document screen to actually see some documents in the record here. It's a little bit slow for some reason. We'll give it a second. Okay, fantastic. The first error of the morning. There we go. It was just being a little bit slow to get started. A little bit like those of us who went to the conference party last night. Okay, so what we can see here is what we saw on the screenshot earlier, is some documents. It looks like we're in CRM though, doesn't it? Apart from the fact that it says SharePoint Documents Associated View there, we wouldn't necessarily know it was SharePoint. What we can see here is a list of documents, customer contract, payment schedule, etc. I can see the modified date, I can see who modified them. So those documents are accessible to me. What that's actually doing is that's actually displaying a SharePoint location, and I'll go into where that's actually displaying them in a short while. If I actually go and pick a specific document, I can click on this, and it will open up. This one does open up in a new tab. That's one of the few things which does open up in a new tab. But it's opening up in Word Online, and I can access the document, I can read it, make changes to it. I'm now in SharePoint, so I've moved away from CRM. I can just close this tab, and now I'm here. You notice when I've selected the document, there's a few options, so I can do things like edit. I can delete, check out, check in. A lot of my regular SharePoint functions. As I unselect this document, notice that that little menu actually changes a little bit. So it's contextual as well. I've got things like new here, so I can actually click new, and this will actually launch web apps to actually start me creating a new document. It's asking me for a name, so we'll just go Evo Demo. Again, it's opening up a new tab in this case for me to actually start filling out some content. We'll just put a little bit of content in there because we don't really want loads of stuff. And you can see immediately as I switch back to CRM that my Evo demo document is available there. Now, if I wanted to dive into actual Word, I could have, from my web apps, opened up Word from my web. So yeah, go ahead.
Is it all right to ask a question?
Yeah, no, go ahead, please.
On the new button, will it pick up content types and templates?
I don't think so, no. Not in CRM. I haven't seen it done. So we can go in, we can create our documents, we can edit them, view them. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned already that you could have multiple document libraries associated with an entity within CRM. Can you do the reverse? Can you have a single document associated with more than one entity?
That's a good question. I think so. I've never tried that. So that's something I will try. I can't see a reason why not. When I go through some of the settings, you'll probably see why. I don't, unless it...
Yeah, I mean, I am familiar with
Yeah.
the integration, so that's why I was wondering if you could customise that. Because generally, when there's a location,
Yeah.
something with a document ID path that you associate to
Yeah.
an entity, but quite
I
is a case
can't see a reason why. I will try it after the session. Feel free to get in contact and we'll have a look at it and we'll try it out. I've not tried that before, but I can't think of any reason why you couldn't.
because the document, there would need to be a link.
Yeah.
Multiple links to the document.
Yeah, but I can't think of anything within the system which would stop you doing that.
Yeah. But like, say for example, you were then to, if everything against that entity maps to a single location in SharePoint,
Yeah.
and you're coming in two different ways, aren't you? The
Yeah.
document might relate to a customer record, and it could relate to a custom entity or something like
Yeah.
that. And they'd have a different view of the documents that relate to each of those records. So you'd have one document, two locations. That's the point.
Yeah. I think it possibly could work. I would need to test it.
Currently, whatever view we are viewing, is it directly viewed from a SharePoint document library, or is it something created in CRM standalone?
So this is a view of a SharePoint document library, so we can still access the documents through SharePoint as well, and I'll show you that in a second.
So if we add a content type there in SharePoint document library, will it directly appear here then?
It will. You could utilize the content types, but it wouldn't appear, as far as I'm aware, in the new menu. So the content types can still be relevant and accessible, but if you're wanting to be using the content types in the creation process, you're probably going to have to be creating your documents in SharePoint rather than the CRM. And there's nothing stopping you doing that, so when I'll show you the SharePoint side of things in a second, there's nothing stopping you going into SharePoint and creating documents and content types and workflows and all that sort of stuff. But I don't think, I'm not seeing a way of actually getting the content types to actually appear in the new menu. But I will come back to those people who have asked on that. Any other questions? Okay, so this is my document library. I'm now going to go back and actually show you some of the creation process. So if I go into, for instance, I think I haven't done it for this record, AdventureWorks. There's two ways which we can manage these areas which are set up in terms of documents. You can either create and set up your SharePoint libraries yourself and then link them to CRM, or you can get CRM to create a location to store documents for that record on the fly, as such as when you first access the record. So when you first go into a record which hasn't got a document location created, CRM will start doing that in a location which has been defined inside of CRM and SharePoint. Now, it's not the nicest experience, but I will still show you it just so you're aware of how it works and what goes on. And it's an important thing to bear in mind, especially from a SharePoint administration point of view. So from inside this AdventureWorks record, I go down here and I go to Documents. And what it will do is actually prompt me to create a folder. This absolutely fabulous URL, which I'll go and show you in a second. Yeah, I know, yeah. Give it a second. And what it's done is it's created that location with nothing in it, but it's created that location straight away. Now I'm just going to quickly stick a document in here so we can see some. We can see that document when we go and have a look at it from SharePoint's perspective. We'll just put a little bit of content in there. So I've created a new document location for AdventureWorks, and that document's visible and stored. Fantastic. So just gone through that basic process of creating a document. Now I've only done this just against a couple of customer records. You can enable this document integration against any type of record or entity, as it's called in CRM. So you can go some of the standard ones it typically uses are stuff like customer, opportunity, case, but you can do it against other record types if that's what you're interested in doing, or use your own entities as well, so you can build your own custom types of entities if you're storing information, I don't know, about properties or something like that. You could store documents associated to it. Okay, so let's dive into SharePoint. Now we've already seen a little bit of the nice interface, which is nice location which it's creating them in. So I'm just going to dive in here to this SharePoint site, which I've called quite neatly SharePoint CRM documents. Now if we look at site contents in this SharePoint site, now this is showing the automatic document integration. So the integration, when I first browse a CRM record into the documents area, it creates this location. And what that actually does is it creates, when you first set it up, a number of document libraries matching to the record types in CRM. So we can see account up there, we can see lead, we can see opportunity, product, quote, and if I actually scroll down the screen, we'll see some of the other ones as well. So I go into account. Now there is a different way to have this working as well, which I'll go into in a second. And if I go into account, you see this. And basically what it's doing is it creates a folder for each of those record types when you first browse that location in CRM. And what it will call that one is the name of the company. Don't worry about the sample, that's just because I'm using sample data in CRM, but it will use the name of the record at the point of creation in this folder. So if you go and change the record's name in the future, it won't change that. And then it puts this sort of GUI ID on the end. Now that's the actual ID of the CRM record, the unique identifier, the account ID or the contact ID or whatever it might be, the entity type, but it's the unique identifier for that record. Microsoft say they do this because it makes integration easier for you. And I'm like, sounds like a nightmare to me. Well, that's the way they do it. And if we actually just go into one of these, so let's say we go into the AdventureWorks, we can actually see that document which I created earlier. So we can see that document which was actually created against the library. So I can see that test. Now there is another way to configure this, and I'll show you the settings around that in a bit. When you set up this automatic integration, you can also have it create subfolders. So instead of going, yeah, go ahead.
Is it possible to build integration in a way how you don't have these folders, but you have all the files all together with some tags or not?
Like with metadata, you mean, to define what documents are.
And when you can like set up some metadata, knowing what kind of record you're creating from
Yeah.
library?
Not possibly. It would be quite hard to do with the standard documents integration, just because that typically links to a specific location. It doesn't have to be a folder, it could be a library, but it's not easy to sort of say, show this sort of view and this filter down view. Using the standard integration, you could probably do it using, inside of CRM you can put in things like iframes and stuff like that into records, so you could do it that way, but I don't think you could do it using the sort of filtered metadata approach. Yeah, I mean, one thing you can do, there are other ways of doing it to be able to point it to like specific libraries and stuff like that, but the folder thing is a bit of a restriction. You couldn't do, what you could do is if you said the same set of like folder of documents associated with different entities, you could do that. It's not straightforward, no, to do this one document is associated with multiple entities. Not using the standard integration. And what we're showing you here is a standard integration. There are options to sort of take that further and develop it and build something specific for you.
Sorry, can I ask
yeah.
a question? Did you say before that if the name of the document changes, it doesn't?
No. If your name of your record in CRM, so if I went along and changed the name of AdventureWorks to, I don't know, PartyWorks, it wouldn't change that name of that folder in SharePoint. So then that would still be called AdventureWorks. These are, apart from the first point when they're connected and they create, they are, that's the point they're linked and the linked is created and then you move on from there. I think I saw another hand up, yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of feels like summing this up is that the approach is that the documents are managed in CRM, they're just stored in SharePoint.
Yeah, precisely. Using the automatic integration, it's essentially, and actually you almost said one of my final closing points, which is that essentially it's using, CRM is using the functionality of SharePoint, and it's not necessarily considering the integration functionality. It's not considering it from a SharePoint's perspective.
Yeah, it's just a storage like
Yeah. Now, there is, obviously I could go in here if I wanted to, and either go new or upload a document. And if I'm uploading documents into this space, then they then are visible inside of CRM. So I can still interact with the documents through SharePoint. It's just that the structure is somewhat poorly considered.
How does the security model work then? Do you have to set it up in?
Yeah, it's not doing anything in terms of security here. So it's completely open. And with CRM, you often have two approaches to security. So you either have quite an open system where everyone who's got a license to CRM has access to all of the data, or you tend to have quite a closed system where specific people have access to specific customers and stuff like that. If that's the case, then you're going to have to do some work, either to set up the security once it's created a folder, or you're going to have to create the locations in SharePoint first with the right security, and then drive it into CRM. And there's a couple of things I'll touch on a little bit later about how you might be able to do that if we have some time. The other option which you get in terms of the automatic integration is you can also do even better, some subfolder structures. So instead of, if we took, for instance, the idea of an account and then an opportunity, so an opportunity is an opportunity to sell someone a product, and you can have multiple opportunities against a single account. In the setup which I've got at the moment, what it will do is it will store documents for AdventureWorks in this location, but then for opportunities, it will store documents in this location. The other way which you can do the setup is to actually say, no, create a subfolder structure below the primary record. So essentially, there'll be a folder created for the account, and when you actually then dive in here, any document specific to the account will appear here, and then there will be subfolders for each of the sort of child records. So you'd have like opportunity 1 with its GUID, opportunity 2 with its GUID, and contact name with its GUID, and then you dive into those folders and see how that looks. There's some links which I'll share at the end, which will link to some material which I've written, which actually shows how that bit works as well. I haven't actually set that up to show you. Okay, so just want to show you a little bit behind the scenes what that's actually doing. So if I dive into the settings of CRM, I'll show you a little bit about how that's actually set up. So if we scroll along on settings until we get to document management, in the document management settings, there's 3 sort of core areas. There is document management settings, SharePoint sites, and SharePoint document locations. The first one I'll go into very briefly because I've already set it up. Again, I've got some guidance online about how that's actually set up. This is the when we're doing the automatic folder creation. So this is basically letting CRM create our document locations. So this is the wizard which you go through when you first set up the integration, where you basically specify where is my SharePoint site where the integration will run, and then you pick the entities which you want it to run on. So I can go through and specifically pick the records types, including if I've got custom entities as well. And then this is where you then define whether it will use the standard setup or use the folder setup, the subfolder setup. So it'll always use a folder setup, but you define whether it's going to use it. Each entity goes into its own library, or they go into like one library and then subfolders within that. I'll cancel out of there. The second area is SharePoint sites. So in here we define what SharePoint sites we're going to use. Actually, I'll switch to all of them because I've got a few here. So these are the SharePoint sites which I've defined for document management. When I set these up, it's quite straightforward. I'm just basically providing a name, a URL. I'll explain a little bit about this in a second. And then I just save those. And the other thing which I have to do, why am I looking at that screen? I'll look at this screen. It is validate those. So once I've set those up, I actually have to do this validation process. And CRM will go off and check that it can actually access that site. If it can't, then it will just fail. And
does it require a service account or permissions into that SharePoint site?
If you're deploying on-prem, it probably will do. In terms of Office 365, it just sort of does it automatically for you. But again, I'll explain a little bit about that in a second because the integration works a little bit differently on-prem. Or it requires some other components. After you set up the SharePoint site, you manage your SharePoint document locations. And these are basically the locations it either creates automatically or you can set these yourself. So if I just scroll down here and I find, for instance, this one for AdventureWorks, and we click in there, we can actually see what's going on here. So you see it gives it a name. it looks for a parent site or location. So this, in this case, documents on default site 1. That's the default name. That's like my default SharePoint site, which it set up at the beginning. It puts in the relative URL. Now, in the automatic integration, this is how it works. So what it's going to do is it's going to create the folder, and then that's the name of it. So basically, it's going to take the whole of the URL, and then it's basically adding that extra bit for that specific location.
Sorry, if you wanted to tidy up your folders, could you just change that?
Yeah, you could do. If you went and changed the folders, you could change that URL. It then also sets what it's regarding. So this is where it's actually linking it to a specific CRM record. Okay. Now, I'll show you, I actually went into it by mistake earlier, but you can actually set up other locations yourself. So if I just go back to SharePoint a second and go into this other setup here where I've got CRM Documents Advanced. I actually used Contoso earlier. So this was the Contoso library which I was in earlier. And I'll show you another one here where I've got AdventureWorks. So I've got AdventureWorks here. So I've got a specific library for AdventureWorks. So this is a second library for AdventureWorks outside of the one which I created earlier. I can go in and I can create another location for AdventureWorks if I want to. So if I go into my document locations and I go new, and we'll call it Adventure Documents. I could call it legal documents or whatever I want to call it. In here, I select my parent site URL. So I go in here and I look at my list and I want to look at CRM Advanced Documents because that's my sort of primary location I'm dealing with. So that's I've already defined that as a site and that's linking to that specific site. In here, I then put in what my URL of my library is. So AdventureWorks. And then I have to look up in the regarding what record type I want to link it to. So AdventureWorks. I hit save. Now, for some reason, I don't know why, it says the URL doesn't exist, even though it does, and it works fine. One of those quirks. If I close this down now, so you see here I've got these documents here in this library with finances and specifications. And I move back here into CRM and go to Sales. And I go to Accounts, I'm in Accounts, and I open up AdventureWorks. And then I go to Documents. Hopefully. It's got my default location here, SharePoint Documents Associated Locations. And hopefully, it doesn't seem to be picking it up. I'll give it a little refresh. Oh, there we go, yeah. Do you see the option there where it's got document location? If I click on this, it will then show me two different options here. So Adventure Docs and Documents on Default Site. So that's this one with its one document location. And if I click on Adventure Docs, it should show me in a second those two other documents. So it's the idea that I've actually linked now to my own library. So one of the options, if we actually don't like the way CRM does the whole automatic creation, we could create the libraries in SharePoint ourselves, and then we could create those locations in CRM. Now, those document locations, which we have any of the developers in the room, those document locations are a record type, an entity type inside of CRM. So you can actually plug into those through the API. So if you wanted to actually create your document locations yourself inside of SharePoint, then you could then go and plug into CRM and update that, or vice versa if you wanted to. Go ahead.
What if you created a library with a document set custom?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've looked at that a couple of times and I've never quite been able to get it working, but I will have another look at it, so do reach out and we'll perhaps have a look at that. That would be a really good idea because document sets are a little bit better than folders. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now this man's just about to walk into the room, so we're all going to give him a massive applause. That's my friend Paul Hunt, who I turned up at 9 o'clock in the morning for his session, and I said 9:45, and the fact he's made it in this early is really impressive. So, okay, so the other thing which I want to show you with the document management locations is, lastly, before we go back to some slides and then some more demos, is I accidentally did dive into this one earlier. I'm going to delete this Evo document because I don't want this one in here because it's a bit confusing. So I've got some documents in this library for Contoso. And in here, you can see the name of the document. We've also got some metadata going on the right-hand side. So we've got a category where we define the category of the document. We've got the publish date. We could be using content types. We could be doing all sorts of things, workflow, whatever. I've already linked this location in. So inside of CRM, inside of document management, I've already set this location. So in here, we should see Contoso docs, yeah? And that's linking to this location here. Now, there is a little bit of customization, which I have to do very quickly. Because what I want to do is make those metadata columns available inside of CRM for me to see. Now, I've done a little bit about this ahead of the game here, just because it takes a little bit of time to set this up. Now, there is some information on my blog about how to do this, and I will mention this, and I will point to that at the end. So what I'm doing here is, I'm modifying the CRM view, and I'm making those metadata columns available. Hopefully, if it all works nicely, we should actually be able to see those metadata columns within inside of CRM. We can't populate them, but we can interface with them. So we can do things like, that was published, wasn't it, that column? Yeah. We can do things like filter the CRM records or sort the CRM records based on those metadata fields. Any questions while I'm doing this?
You do that via the API?
Probably, yes. Yeah, probably. You only have to do this sort of once. It's just because I want to show you it without them on and then them not on, just because otherwise they'll be a bit confusing at the start. So what I'm doing here is just making a quick customization. Now what I'm actually doing, and again, I've got a link to this at the end, is you create the metadata columns in SharePoint, and what you have to do is just create matching fields with the same name in CRM, and CRM will pick those up. There's a really nice blog article about how to do this. So if I just dive back in here into sales, and go into accounts, and go to Contoso, and if I go into my Contoso documents now, hopefully, yeah, fantastic. I had a screenshot in preparation because this bit wasn't working yesterday. I can see that I've got my documents here, and I've got my metadata fields of category, and I've got published here. Like I said, we can't interface with those metadata fields in terms of editing them, but we can do things like sort. So we can sort by that published date. Yeah, we can even do things like filters. It's not the most perfect filter in the world, but it's not bad. So we have to do sort of custom filters, and we basically just have to say, for instance, equals contract. And we can see and filter that view. We can also use those metadata fields within the advanced find functionality. So anyone's familiar with CRM, you can use advanced find. So you could actually do queries across the CRM records to actually find records based on certain documents which are tagged against them. The only limitation which I've found so far, which I was trying to play around with yesterday, is there's only a single view which you can actually present documents for. So you can't, unfortunately, present a view which says, show me contract documents, and then a different view which shows me SLA documents. You can do that you could do advanced finds, but you can only have a single view which presents them all, and then you have to do the filters.
Can you not then view these documents through the contract? Then you view it through the account?
Again, it's what it's linked to. So yeah, as such, there are, like I said, a few limitations around it. Okay. I think that's probably enough stuff which I'm going to show you. So I'm going to just dive back into my slides. Okay, and then we'll move on. So we've been through that. Now there is one key thing which I want to show you for those of you who are operating on-prem at the moment. It doesn't work the same in every scenario. So this is how the documents look in SharePoint Document Associated View on Office 365, and that's how it typically looks in on-prem. It doesn't look quite as nice. It's using a different component if you're using on-prem. So in Office 365, it's using this thing called the Serverside Integration, which basically makes the authentication between the two a little bit easier. On-prem, it's still using a sandbox solution to do it. Boo, yeah, good old Microsoft consistently using the same approach, the standard approach to things. So it does work a little bit differently. I'll talk in a second about what that means in terms of deployment. So it does look a little bit different in terms of how the interface works. The functionality is largely the same, but you might find that one or two of the menu options don't look as slick in on-prem as they do in Office 365. But in terms of the way you can create document locations and stuff like that, it works exactly the same. Oh, okay. Text message, thank you. So just wanted to pull this slide up here just so we're aware of the different versions available and what that means. So within CRM Online, SharePoint Online, it uses a server-side integration. That's the only one which uses the new server-side integration, and pretty much it's a one-button click to set it up. In terms of all the other setups, there is more involved, and it depends on which flavor of CRM and SharePoint you've got, that you use basically different flavors of what's called this list component. And this is this sandbox solution component. Even if you're using SharePoint Online, you then have to use, and you're using CRM on-prem, you still have to use the list component. So for instance, where I'm using CRM Online with SharePoint on-prem, it uses the list component, or vice versa. It works differently. This list component is a sandbox solution. You just have to make sure you download the right one and install it. There is a couple of extra steps. It's well documented out on the web where you have to, there's a setting you have to enable in your SharePoint farm. There's also a PowerShell script which you have to run to get it, a certain setting working as well. I think I link out to that content as well. If anyone's not sure, do reach out as well. So just a quick thing about understanding the integration, because we're running quite tight on time. The good stuff is it's got version control, check-in, check-out. You can use metadata. You can use the web apps. Downside is, yeah, the reliance on folders is pretty grim. There's no SharePoint security either. It does work differently on-prem, and it does work differently per version of CRM or SharePoint you're using. So you do have to bear all those things in mind. Okay. So
when you say there's no SharePoint security,
yeah.
If that user just didn't have permissions on the document.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to get to it. Yeah, they wouldn't be able to get to it. Yeah. Yeah.
So it should security trim as per the.
Yeah, so it's not that there is no SharePoint security, it's more that you have to set up. It doesn't deal with SharePoint security itself, so you have to deal with SharePoint security. Yeah, good point, thank you. Okay, just some of the other integration options, which I just want to briefly mention, and I'll do some quick demos of those. There's a few other things which you could think about doing with CRM. So there is some Yammer integration, dependent on the flavor you've got. CRM 2013, CRM 2015 have Yammer integration. CRM 2011, you have to be on a specific patch roll-up of CRM to make the Yammer integration available. And what that does is it allows you to actually either contextually embed a whole group or the whole of Yammer in your homepage, but also have contextual Yammer conversations about a specific record, either from within CRM or outside in Yammer itself. Power BI, I'll talk about the other two in a second. Power BI, there are some Power BI connectors, so we can actually connect to Power BI from CRM, build out dashboards. We can even embed dashboards inside of CRM as well now, and I'll show you that briefly. The two other areas which are commonly used for integration, although there's nothing out of the box really to do it, is firstly business connectivity services. So if we want to connect to our CRM data and surface it inside of SharePoint, maybe use it for things like search. So commonly people want to do things like search for a contact, search for a customer's details, but don't necessarily want to have people going into CRM to do it. They want to make it a bit easier and accessible. So that's stuff which is commonly done, but you're going to have to write the BCS connection yourself. There's not a pre-configured way to do it. There's lots of documentation out there to do it, but you're either going to have to develop it or you're going to have to use stuff like Lightning tools to actually be able to do that. Okay, so we'll quickly dive into one more demo, and I'll just show you these things quite briefly. Okay, so the first one is the Yammer integration. You may well have seen some of this going on. For instance, you'll notice on my homepage, I've got Yammer going on here, so I've got a Yammer conversation going on screen here. And when I dive into a specific opportunity, we can actually see the Yammer conversations going on. So for instance, if we dive into this one, so if I go into this specific opportunity for Contoso, I can see a specific Yammer conversation going on. So maybe this specific person has reached out because they want to progress this opportunity, but they want some more feedback about that specific product. Maybe they've hashtagged that product, so people following that specific trend on Yammer will actually want to respond to that. And actually, if I scroll down here, the screen resolution is not massive, but I can see that someone's responded to that, maybe called out a specific person to interface with, and that person's fed back and actually linked out to some SharePoint content, which I can maybe go and click on, and that takes me straight into my SharePoint document there, which they've reached out to me with. If I look in Yammer, I can see the same thing going on in Yammer. So actually, that's showing me my whole Yammer feed there, but I can see this specific item here, which I've talked about in Yammer. There's a link here to actually that item. If I click on that item, if I've got permissions, it will call me straight out to CRM, so I can go into the record. And it will even have this sort of page in Yammer, which will show me the whole conversation just about that individual record. So there are some options within Yammer in terms of how we set that up. You're basically just linking out within the settings. It's either under business management. No, it's not. It's under administration. Just inside of administration, I've got my Yammer configuration where I just define the Yammer network I'm connected to. You have to have an enterprise Yammer network to be able to do this. And the Yammer group ID, so I can either link to the whole of Yammer or I can have the conversations going on in a specific group. It's not perfect, it's not the sort of greatest integration in the world, but I think it potentially is quite nice in terms of the idea that you could have a lot of people outside of CRM with knowledge who can maybe input on a case or an opportunity. So be able to get that information fed into CRM, contextual to the specific users, is quite useful. The other thing which I just wanted to quickly show you is some of the Power BI stuff. So if I just dive into this reporting site, and then into Power BI. While that's loading, I'll just quickly show you this in Excel. So inside of Excel, and if I go into Power Query, so I've either downloaded or enabled all of the various Power tools. I can collect from other sources, and this is either in Excel or in the new Power Query Designer. It's available as well, Power BI Designer. It's available as well. And I look in the options here, and it will point out and call out to Dynamics CRM Online, and this will load me up a little screen here. Inside of CRM, I have to go to my settings, and I go to customizations and developer resources. And what it's looking for is this OData service here, this URL at the bottom. And I can copy that in. And this will actually connect to the OData feed and actually pull in CRM and CRM data. Now, I've already set this up, so it's automatically pulling it in. If you try it yourself, there's one extra important screen where you have to bear in mind and look at and make sure your authentication is set up correctly. So you have to make sure that you're signing in with your organizational account to be able to access the data. To be able to do it, you probably need a little bit of familiarity with either the CRM API or the CRM data structure, because some of the terminologies are in more of the CRM field names to be able to get all the data through. So you need to spend a little bit of time, a little bit of work within Power Query, but you don't have to do all the connections. So just diving into my reporting quickly, I've got this Evo demo report, which I prepared nicely earlier, and I've got a couple of Power Views set up. Hopefully. And what this should load me up is just some really simple Power Views. Actually, they don't look too bad on screen. So for instance, here I've got some information about cases I've got going on. I can see who cases are assigned to, the different stages of the case, and what customers. And it's all interactive, you know, so I can click on a specific service person and it'll pull down and limit the data. So it's quite nice and interactive to be able to give me some dashboards. Again, these dashboards are outside of CRM, so I can start working with them straight away. I can dive into other things. So in here, it's a little bit small, but as I move through my customers, I can see the number of cases. I can see the current opportunity value. I can even pull things out to maps as well. So here I've mapped my values of my opportunities by cities, and I can scroll around the map and zoom in, and I can see where I've got a lot of opportunities going on, but also the sizes are reflecting the value. Now, I haven't had time to set this up, but you could also even wire this up to like Power Q&A as well. So you can actually ask questions and say, you know, who's our top selling salesperson, you know, how many open cases have we got, and it will work with Power Q&A as well. One last thing, which is new, which I've only just sort of basically getting set up, and it doesn't look great, but you can actually, and you might have noticed when I set up a document location earlier, there was like a little option which said, enable this location for embed Power BI stuff. I'll briefly show you that again, because we're doing actually surprisingly well for time. So inside my SharePoint document location, when I set one up, there is a little option here. No, it might be in sites actually. Thanks, Randy. Yeah, so allow embedding of Power BI reports inside of my SharePoint libraries. And if I actually go back, what that actually means, or inside of CRM, what that actually means is I can actually build dashboards. So any of you who are familiar with dashboards inside CRM can either build personal or system dashboards. And what that actually does is, for some reason, I need to play around a little bit in terms of which screen it loads first, but I can actually call out my Power BI dashboards directly inside of CRM, hopefully if it's with me. So I'm actually inside of CRM, but I've got this sort of contextual dashboard, and still even stuff like my clicking and stuff like that still works. So that's quite new. That's only come along in the last few weeks, I think. Certainly, I only saw it for the first time yesterday, so I'm quite glad that's working. So there's quite a few things which we can do with BI to make it sort of quite interesting. That's just online at the moment. I think I have to test that because I haven't actually tried it on my on-prem system. So I'll try it on my on-prem system and I will let you know, because it might, with some of the latest updates on-prem, might work. I'd have to.
Power Queries is an add into Excel, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the desktop version, but I'm not sure whether it's configured to be able to point it to CRM Online as a data source. Looks like you can connect to Salesforce, okay?
Yeah, I've not had a problem. I've connected to CRM data as well.
Through the Excel.
Yeah.
Through the desktop version of
Yeah,
Excel.
yeah. That's how I set it up in the first place. So yeah, I've not had a problem with that at all.
So yeah, right. That's going to work.
Yeah, it should work. That works fine. The only question was the embedding in CRM. I'm not sure if you can embed it in CRM on-prem. I'm not sure about that, but certainly, yeah, you can do it. You can connect to it.
So it just doesn't recognise the endpoint for a on-premise version of CRM. Then is that what?
No. It recognises an endpoint. The only question which I wasn't sure about was when the last thing I did, which was showing the dashboard inside of CRM.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure if that works with CRM on-prem, so I will check out that in terms of connecting to either desktop Excel, connecting to CRM Online. That works fine because that's how I set up the demo. And connecting to CRM on premises, that works as well from it as well.
It's a bit confusing picture then, isn't it? Because Power BI is a cloud-only.
Yeah, but Microsoft are encouraging you to still have data on-prem, but then using Power BI to surface that data in the cloud. So yeah, but it is a little bit of a confusing picture, but that is what Microsoft are trying to do. Okay, so just a few slides to quickly wrap up with. So just a couple of things about understanding the integration with some of those other options. It does let you do some quite cool things. So work with CRM data outside of CRM. You don't have to be a CRM user to actually interact with that data. It does allow things like rich reporting. And Microsoft are making it easier. So some of the stuff like the integration with Power BI and inside of Excel. Previously, you just had to connect through the regular OData feed options. Now there is a specific CRM one, so it keeps on growing as well. Generally, you still have to build it, with the exception of the Yammer stuff. Everything else you do have to sort of build out. There are a few differences and stuff like that. You're going to have some cloud services to do this. So you're still going to, even if you've got CRM on-prem, you're still going to have stuff like Power BI, Yammer in the cloud and stuff like that to do some of that. There are some differences still between versions and stuff like that. So like I said, with some of the older versions, you can't use the Yammer integration. I can't remember how many versions back, like the OData feed is available as well. I think it's only to 2013. There are some licensing considerations. So if you are getting people who are not CRM full-on users, good old Microsoft, you still have to have a read-only license to do it. It's not that expensive, but you still have to have a license to access the data. If you're an employee, if you're a non-employee, there's no license costs. But if you are an employee and you need to access CRM data, even if you're not actually a direct CRM user, there's I think it's called a read-only license or a light license. They keep on changing the name. Just a couple of things, key things just to think about in terms of approaching a project. Just a few key things to consider. Firstly, think about what the requirement is, problem we're trying to solve. Think a little bit about the user environment as well. So what sort of mobile devices, other devices are they going to be interacting with them? How are they going to be accessing the CRM? Is it directly through CRM? Is it through SharePoint? Is it through another interface as well? Think about the different technologies you're going to need, what the purpose of that product is within the solution, where the integration touch points are going to be. And think about your platform to meet the requirements. So is it going to be cloud, on-prem, hybrid, and also licensing considerations, which I pulled out earlier. There are like full licenses, there's read-only licenses, there's also this thing called like XRM license. So if you want to, if you want the capabilities of CRM, but without the default functionality. So if you want the ability to create relationships and do all the cool things with activities with CRM, but you don't actually want accounts and contacts and cases, you're going to build your own system with it, then you can do that with like the XRM license, which is a little bit cheaper, although there are some considerations that you have to have a few full-blown licenses before you can buy the full XRM licenses, but you can do that.
It seems like there's also a separate CRM marketing module.
Yeah, so Microsoft bought Marketing Pilot 6-12 months ago, and so you can buy that as a separate thing. That's only a cloud-only service, but you can add that in, and the idea is the marketing people, it gives them a whole suite of marketing functionality. There is some marketing functionality in the core CRM product in terms of doing emailing and stuff like that, but this is a full-on marketing management system.
Do you know how much the licenses are at per seat?
Not off the top of my head. I'll look it up and I'll send you out the link. In terms of developing a solution, think about what drives what. So are you going to create records in CRM from SharePoint, or you're looking up data from CRM from SharePoint, or you're creating X in SharePoint from CRM? There's lots of different ways you could be doing so. What's the driver? Who's the leader in this? Is SharePoint the leader? Is CRM the leader? Or are different bits doing different bits in the process? Think about how the solution will evolve. This is a big one for me. So are you building something which is very, very specific, quite customized, specific to you, and you have to bear in mind that then it's a big deal to sort of upgrade this and move this forward? Or are you actually keeping something quite lightweight because you're signing up to more of that Microsoft rapid release? Microsoft are doing like 6 monthly releases on CRM, so there's a spring update, at least online, and you can then download those things and update them on-prem. They're bringing in a lot of functionality into CRM. They're investing heavily in it. If you want to go along and follow that path, you have to sort of, you're looking at doing something which is more of what Microsoft are doing out the box with some small customizations, but not heavy development. I've got other customers who are quite heavily customized, a lot of development, and progressing them and moving forward with them through the versions is a big deal, and it's suddenly like a 3 or 4 year life cycle. So you have to think about what you're trying to sign up to. I will call out a couple of the vendors like Nintex and K2. Their workflow solutions do have CRM plugins. So if you want that you can be able to create records in CRM from a Nintex workflow or from K2. So there are some options if you've got those products as well, making it a bit easier for you. Okay, so just a couple of quick slides to wrap up on, and a couple of things about some new stuff as well, which is coming. So do understand the integration. That's what this topic is about. Understand the out-of-the-box integration. Whoever said that earlier is completely CRM focused. So like stuff like the document management, if you're just using the standard settings, it's going to create folders with horrible IDs and stuff like that. That's the way it works, unfortunately. But do understand your requirements in terms of what you're implementing, whether you need the out-of-the-box integration or you need to build something specific for yourself. Understand who needs to do what in each product, you know, who needs what product, what they're going to be actually doing. That helps you define what sort of integration you want. Understand the type of solution, how it will progress to that point which I've just talked about in terms of, is your solution going to be something which is very specific to you, a lot of work building it, or is it going to be something which is more closely aligned with what Microsoft are building in CRM, especially in Office 365? Okay, so I wanted to call this out because anyone who's sort of thinking about buying CRM, this is like a really cool offer which Microsoft are doing till the end of June. Basically, you get Dynamics CRM, Office 365 E3, and Power BI, and it's called this Sales Productivity Pack for £42 per user per month. It's normally a lot more, so it is actually quite a good deal. You can obviously then just have regular Office 365 users and other things like that, so not everyone has to have this price. It's also a lower price if you've already got Office 365 E3, so you just add this bit in. Basically, from what I understand from Microsoft is as long as you sign up to this before the end of June, you'll get 12 months of this price, and then it will go up to the slightly higher price, whatever that might be. But this is quite a good deal if you're seriously looking at it because it's significantly cheaper. You know, you get full-blown CRM, E3, which is including Office as well, and all the Power BI functionality as well. So that's quite a good offer. So do look out for it. The link's there. I will share these slides. Also, just picked up on this yesterday, the Spring 2015 update, which is coming to Office 365, and it will probably be called CRM 2015 Service Pack 1. I would really like to demo some of this functionality because this is really cool. So things like, supposedly you'll be able to create Office 365 groups from inside of CRM and link them to a record. That's quite cool. I like groups. People like groups. People play around with groups. Supposedly you can do stuff like quick analysis with Excel Online, so basically pull data from CRM quickly into Excel Online and do some analysis straight from a CRM record, so you can just have a list of records and go export to Excel Online and start interfacing with it. You can embed OneNote files into records and actually use OneNote to store your notes rather than the notes functionality in CRM, which is a bit poor. I put this up there just because it's cool, Cortana integration. So if you see some of the examples on the web where you basically say, you can come out of a meeting and you can like tell Cortana something and it will update CRM, so you can update it with the, or even go like, bin Cortana and I want to create an appointment and it will go and update Cortana. So there's a little link there which links out to some of the new stuff in terms of the next release. Microsoft is basically saying that's Q2 sometime, so I'm not sure quite on the release date, but do watch out for that. Once that stuff's out there, I'm certainly going to have a look at it and probably update my session and do a few blog posts about it, because some of that stuff's quite interesting and exciting. Okay, we've run a few minutes over, but we are on a room transition, so I'll give you guys a couple of minutes if you've got any questions. Anyone? We've had a lot of questions during the session. Any other questions? If not, do feel free to come and see me during, at the end of this or during the rest of the conference. I'll be sticking around for a little while. All of those resources, which I'm going to share on these slides. The top one, I wrote an article on this for the Dutch Information User Group magazine, which has, I think it's the latest issue, which has a whole thing about the SharePoint documents integration and the setup. So that's a good place if you want to see more about the setup. It's quite step by step. And various of these articles go through everything which I've used to create this slide deck, all the various setups and stuff like that. These are various blog articles which I've used. These slides will be up before the end of the day, so you can go and access them and access all these links. Thank you very much for attending and enjoy the rest of the conference.